Fox and Friends is reacting to some of what continues to come out, including that tape CNN got of Donald Trump and the classified documents he was allegedly waving around that factors into some of the prosecution on those charges, the special counsel prosecution on those charges. Let's actually, Krystal, I can't even describe it. You can never capture these things with words. Let's just play the clip.
You know, regarding the leaking of this particular tape, when you look at what Jillian just said, where she said Trump posted on Truth Social, the deranged special prosecutor Jack Smith, working in conjunction with the DOJ and FBI, illegally leaked and spun a tape and transcript of me, which is actually an exoneration. So you know what? If Trump thinks it's an exoneration of him, perhaps somebody on his side actually did the leaking to CNN and Maggie Haberman.
That's amazing, Cope. This is actually, it's an exoneration, so actually it was probably good for Trump. They probably leaked it.
The Meadows part of that is actually quite interesting, though, where he's saying, this is Steve Doocy is saying, he's admitting he's got classified documents and, quote, clearly Mark Meadows has, or this is from Brian Kilmeade, he says, clearly Mark Meadows has flipped. He has disappeared as chief of staff. He knows everything, and he seems to be in control of these tapes, you would think, or his biographer does, in a book that nobody read, Kilmeade adds. And that's what's interesting to me from their theory, is that Mark Meadows' biographer is allegedly the person who is, you know, we've heard from the indictment that the other person on the tape is a writer. And nobody's really been able to figure out who that writer is. You know, is it a journalist? I heard someone throwing around like different names. I won't even name them because it's not substantiated, but journalists. And in fact, it actually could just be that this was a Meadows ghostwriter. And that's actually been reported out, that this was apparently somebody who was helping a Mark Meadows memoir. So then it raises this question of, has Mark Meadows flipped in all of these? Because apparently Trump is also being investigated for, well, we know that he is, for January 6th stuff, but the special counsel is apparently looking into January 6th stuff too. Mark Meadows is obviously a huge part of all of that as chief of staff at the time. We've seen some of the text messages. And so for this to then make it not just to CNN, but into the special counsel, into their indictment, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. I mean, if I was Meadows, I'd flip, right? I mean, for real, he's, I'm sure, in legal jeopardy, you know, and no guarantees that Trump would win and be in a position to pardon him. No guarantees that he would pardon him if he did get, you know, back into the White House. So, you know, if he was offered a deal to cooperate, first of all, I mean, it is a big problem for Trump because we've been understandably talking about the classified document stuff recently because that's what the latest charges came down, but they're moving forward with, you know, investigations into January 6th and fake electors and whatever. I mean, Mark Meadows was there for all of this stuff. So he no doubt knows the, you know, inner mindset and potentially has some, you know, other information that he could provide or other recordings or whatever. So the theory is basically that it was Mark Meadows' ghostwriter that was the one in the other person in the room.
That's the writer that's in the room.
Because you hear a Trump aide who is embarrassingly sycophantic. You hear Trump being classic, quintessential Trump, talking about Anthony Weiner and like asking for the Diet Cokes.
Yeah, he's like can we get some Cokes in here?
Right. I mean,
Which you've said before, I've heard it. Krystal will sometimes just be like...
Just demand it.
Like, we need some Cokes in here.
When you need a Diet Coke, you need a Diet Coke.
There's a button under the desk.
But yeah, that would be, if Meadows truly did flip, that I have to think is an issue for Trump. But he has struggled to explain away this tape. Trump is claiming that the papers you hear rustling, like it was just bravado. He didn't really have these classified documents. Didn't he say they were like building plans or something like that?
That's what I was just going to pivot to here is Donald Trump himself, speaking of Copes, gives an interview on his plane to Semaphore and ABC News, I believe this was on Tuesday night. He says, quote, I would say it was bravado. If you want to know the truth, it was bravado. I was just talking and just holding up papers and talking about them, but I had no documents. I didn't have any documents. He said, I just held up a whole pile of, my desk is loaded up with papers. I have papers from 25 different things. And yeah, this is, yeah, he says.
Kind of like a locker room talk defense, right? Isn't it?
A sophisticated locker room talk.
It's the same though. It's like, yeah, it was just, you know, it's just bullshit.
So he had told Fox on this was also Tuesday, quote, that he had plans, building plans. Did I use, and then he goes to Semaphore and ABC News and says, did I use the word plans? What I'm referring to is magazines, newspapers, plans of buildings. I had plans of buildings, building plans. I had plans of a golf course. So it's just I don't know, what to make of it? Who knows at this point?
Yeah. Right. If this was the only piece of evidence that they had against him in the classified documents thing, you might be like, maybe you can try to create some reasonable doubt.
Right.
Maybe he's got a shot at. But given that they appear to have a lot more than that, including, surveillance tapes of him moving boxes around and getting his lawyers to lie and all this sort of stuff, or at least lying to his lawyers and then getting them to repeat the lie, just wiggling out of this one potentially, I think it's not going to be enough. But this one is also pretty damning. I mean, you got the papers rustling in the background. You have him actually saying, I could have declassified these documents when I was president, but I didn't, and they are still secret and confidential because I did not declassify them. That's devastating for the defense they were planning to mount. But at this point, I think all he really cares about is the political defense because in terms of a case, you never know. Maybe you get a juror who's just super pro-Trump and they're not going to convict him no matter what. But if you take him out of it, the details of the case are pretty open and shut.
Right. And I think that's why there's so much focus on this audio. First of all, media is always going to gravitate towards something when there's audio of it actually happening. That's fun.
Yes.
But secondly, it's because he says the thing about these documents not being declassified.
Right.
I could have declassified them. And what people are trying to ascertain now is the severity, because there's such an overclassification problem, is what he's waving around with this writer about Iran and what he's talking about with Mark Milley. Is it about golf courses, or is it what we've heard from the special counsel was in those stacks of papers that were being shuffled around Mar-a-Lago and actually pertaining to our nuclear secrets? That's a pretty legitimate question because it gets to how Donald Trump was actually using the classified information he had at Mar-a-Lago, a den of spies.
Yes.
An obvious den of spy activity.
Yes.
So there's a pretty legitimate question. And people have floated these theories that he was using it to give to foreign leaders and he was selling it for Trump Organization business ideas, or is he just keeping it as trophies? Or is it a little bit of both? I don't know. Or is he keeping it, the most legitimate defense he has is that he's keeping it for his own records because the intelligence community has tried to screw him over so many times. He wants to know what everything said, what was said, and what they may be using against him. Now, if I were Donald Trump, that is the most legitimate argument that I would have, and I would focus on it. I don't think that's the case here.
Well, here's the thing. Remember early on when there was discussion about these classified documents, there was a theory that all the classified documents had to do with Russiagate. And so he was keeping them because of proof of whatever, deep state plot, et cetera, et cetera. But now that we know what was in the documents, the documents, some of them may have had to do with Russiagate, but there was a lot else that was in there, including, very highly sensitive information that isn't the type of stuff that's just it's overclassified, that if anything should be a government secret, the stuff about our nuclear weapons program should probably be a government secret. That's a pretty legit one that I think everyone would pretty much agree on. So I give less credence to that argument about Trump's mentality. There's no evidence that he was actively selling this information.
Right.
Not that I put it past him, but just, you gotta there was nothing offered in this indictment that would lend credence to that view. But in some cases, the risk that you have all this so easily accessible in a wildly insecure place where you have all these people, some of them already documented as being foreign spies coming and going. It could be just as damaging and ultimately to national security. So not a good set of facts.
I was going to say, it's not good either way. There's no real cope here that's going to
it's not going to work out for you.
It just this particular case it's too hard for him to wriggle out of on that point.
Well,
the question of whether Meadows flipped is interesting, but we'll keep an eye on that for sure.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.